Hi, this is K.N.Fitzwater. You're watching my channel. Today we're going to talk about representation. I know some of you are wondering, it's August, shouldn't we be talking about this in July? Well, representation is not just a 1 month ordeal. People are queer year-round, people are black year-round. You can't change that. So let's talk about representation. Why representation? Why you should do it? I'm not going to talk about that. I figured that if you wanted to do it, you're going to do it. If you don't want to do it, you're just not going to put it in there. And I'm not here to convince you why you should consider other people as people, no matter what kind of person they are. That's not what this video is about. This video is going to talk about what things to consider when you are trying to double check your work to see if you are doing your diverse characters right. And I'm coming from a queer background. I've been a demisexual before I even heard the term demisexual. I known people who are in the community. I'm queer. I write queer characters. The doppelganger queen is queer. So that's the main focus that I'll be talking about in this video. If you're here for any sort of grievance against this community, you could take it elsewhere. Any negative post about it is going to be deleted and gone, so I'm just not going to tolerate it. So you could just go on over there. So I'm just not going to deal with it. So this video is for those who need some guidance and just want my opinion or my viewpoint about it as you're working on your story craft through these editing revisions and drafts and what you're trying to consider in keeping the story, a proper story. You're telling it in a dramatic fashion, trying to explain the transformation these characters go through. Or if not really a transformation, if it's a flat arc, the transformation they had on the boat. Something has to change in your story. So how does queer representation fits in that transformation? So let's get started. A kind of bit of a word of encouragement. If you are here because you are already queer, you already have queer characters, and anything I'm going to say from here on out where you're just nodding your head off like, yes, I've been doing these things. But you just feel intimidated and scared because of the climate that we have. I'm here to tell you that there are those who are waiting for this kind of work to come out. There are those who are like you and me. There are those that are willing to support this material coming out. I don't care if it's a book, comic book, or comic novel, if it's a animation, if it's a movie or a TV show, any sort of storytelling that you put into words. There is a audience out there that's going to accept it and read it and watch it and own it. So of all the negative crap that we're dealing with. It's always been there. It's been there before I was born, and I was born in the mid-80s. These deplorables who have nothing else better in their lives than create harm towards others are always going to be there. They're always going to make everyone miserable because they're miserable in themselves. And you should never have to worry about those people. You shouldn't have to consider about their opinions or attitudes. You should only worry about the audience you're writing for. So in the publishing community, there's people other than J.K. Rowling in the literature community that support these kind of works. There are people that are younger, fresher, and hungrier in wanting these works to come out. You don't have to worry about people like her or George R. R. Martin and not being accepting or brushing you off. There are publishers and lit agents that are willing to accept your work. It's just a matter of finding them. So I would go, if not for fantasy or sci-fi, if you're in those categories, or horror, you could always try to go for LGBTQ publishers, such as Cleise, C-L-E-I-S-E, and they're going to accept those kind of materials and help you get your voice out there. There's also a growing number of big publishing companies, such as DAW, D-A-W, that will accept these works from people like us. I think a couple of years ago, I'm not sure, it's 2017 or 2018, they are willing to accept materials that are diverse, that come from a different background, that the publishing companies have been selecting. Now, sometimes it's, I want to say, sometimes it's deliberate, and that has been an issue in the past. Sometimes it's ignorance. Some people don't realize how thick their blinders are when they're selecting the works. But it's finally coming out, and people are readdressing these issues and accepting these new stories coming in, because there is an audience out there that will eat it up. So don't forget that you're not alone. There are lit agents that are looking for these works. They do advertise they are LGBTQ friendly on their profiles. And there are publishers looking for these materials. And you do have readers that will go in and enjoy this. So don't despair. Don't be discouraged. There's always going to be flack out there no matter what kind of work you do. Even if it's just a straight romance that's vanilla, you know. Some people like that. Even something like that, everyone's going to rip it to shreds just because they're just horrible. You know, they have nothing better to do, and they just want to take it apart and say that I could do better. Which you could say to them, well, okay, go ahead and do it. Do your own way. Do your own thing. If you don't like it, you don't have to read it. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch. You could go elsewhere. They're not worth your time. So let's say that you do want to put in, you know, representation in your book, and you're not part of this community, but you really want to because you have friends who are, or, you know, you want to diversify your work, or all of a sudden you have a character that is this way. And you don't know if you're doing it right. So we're going to talk about how it's more than just being a label, what it means to us, and how that can influence the character's decisions or actions, and kind of the stuff you have to think in the back of your brain as you're constructing how the society and these small groups of people are going to react. It's more than just a label. You can just have a society that is accepting, that doesn't care, kind of like the first and second Dragon Age games where everyone is just cool, everyone is just bisexual, and it's all, hunky-dory, there's no issues here. And for a while that's okay. That's all right. The only issue you have to worry about is, romantic tensions and trying to, the normal standards of romance. Person meets true love. True love doesn't notice how they're going to get their attention. Is it really one way? Oh, look, they actually do, so they hook up. Then extraordinary circumstances make them split apart. Oh no, and then they eventually come back together. So that is the normal whole romantic arc. That's pretty typical, but everyone likes this roller coaster. There's some really good, normal tensions there, and you could always twist it to make it however you want. Being queer is more than just a sexual or romantic orientation. It's also dealing with gender orientation. There are those who are third gender. People who are non-binary. They're not what our society determined as male or female. As someone who had studied biology, I have a bachelor's in biology. I took my associates in veterinary technology, and I have a master's in veterinary forensics. So there's a lot of animal studies I have to look at concerning animal medicine and how animals live in a domestic household that is sometimes not good in dealing with neglect. But coming back to my bachelor's in biology, there was a course in neuropathology where we talk about gender, what it is. And ultimately, gender is a social construct because there's different levels of what we would call gender. In a chromosomal level, you have the X and Y chromosome. Sometimes you have extra. Sometimes you have mutations. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we got autism. If you have an extra chromosome, that makes you an X-Men. So there's nothing wrong with it. Then you have hormonal gender, where you have testosterone and estrogen. I almost forgot my stuff. Almost forgot my stuff. So you have that, plus other sexual. These terms are so old. Eventually, we need an update. You have these hormones that control your phenotypical expressions. Phenotypical means the outside layer, what we see here on the outside, like pigmentation, or how the muscles are formed on the body. the outer layer that we're seeing that's being expressed, that we are able to touch and manipulate. So those hormones also govern chemical interactions. That's why we have women that have facial hair. We have men that have what we call feminine forms, etc. Some of those we will say go haywire, causing thyroid problems or any other problems with menstruation. If you're going into the medical side of things. But what we would consider only men have hair and women only have hair in certain places and none here, is ridiculous. And it is societal conformation. Conformation. You're trying to conform to the societal standards. That's not something that's happening with our biology. You also have phenotypic expressions in our reproductive systems. Even that is not a square X or Y, there are those who are hermaphrodites. There are those that had a uterus and everything when they were children, and as they grew older, become men. They had been expressed in a hormonal way where they become men. You also have where try not to get too graphic because YouTube is really... There's nothing wrong with YouTube. It's just hard to talk about medical stuff, about the biology, about the body and biology without being too graphic, because we're a little bit more straight on the point. There are some parts that are going to express in the gray areas. Sometimes you have in horses, crypt orchids, where you only have one testicle, and you have another that kind of functions like an ovary, but it never descended. You have some animals and humans that have a full functioning uterus without ovaries, and instead they have testicles. It can occur. That's part of nature. It's just what it is. So you're starting to see that there's no black and white, one way or another. It's all societal in our definitions, especially color schemes. When I was going through the early 2000s, men claim pink back. It used to be a masculine color in the turn of the 1900s. Men used to wear pink and red, and they've decided to go back to that, trying to make that more of a masculine color, which is totally fine. They could have it. I'm not a Pink fan. Not the singer, but the color. And you have women that's like, I'm not into that color. I'm into other colors like lavender or purple, or or they like stronger colors like red, orange, yellow. So even just color, is the mindset of the culture, and it's different depending which culture you go to. The meanings of colors change depending which society you go to. So Being queer is understanding that what we have been spoon fed in our society is superficial. It's superficial as much as the clothes on our skin. And you can ignore it. You can do something else other than what you're told to do. This is why you're seeing most people coming out when they're in high school. This is a general time where teenagers are starting to wake up that there's more to life beyond their family, and that there's different ways of living, some good, some bad, and they can't wait to become adults so that they could take charge of their lives and, forge ahead a new direction in society. And I'm very proud of them. Some of them are very good in advocating for a proper change in our society. So long they wear a mask, I will be okay with it. You're not immune. You're not immune. There have been cases where people are getting sick from my age down, so be careful. You're not immune. Now, because it's dealing with the overarchs of society, you are asking yourself not just the label of the character, you're asking about how you had constructed this fictional society around this character. So the questions you should ask yourself is, how do my queer person interact on a personal to personal basis? Interpersonal interactions. This is probably something you probably got down pretty right, but you could always ask your queer friends if you want to double check. But also how they deal with group to group interactions, like in school cliques or in college with sororities or fraternities or none of the aboves. And then you start progressing to, how does society's laws affect your character? And how is it different on them compared to everyone else? Is it illegal? Is it okay? Are they actually being oppressed? If the answer is yeah, they are living in a society where they are belittled, who is going to represent that belittling? What are the kind of people that will interact them in this manner? Perhaps you can escalate your story, your tension, with how society is interacting with your character. But you can, if you put this in your story, build your tension up with how society is an obstacle to your character, or how society is the hero. What if they live in a place that is accepting, that is, trying to support, people who are queer? How is that being reflected? So let's say that somewhere in the book, there's a time where it was considered illegal for these people to come together. And then there's a court case that said, no, they are supposed to come together. And then they're able to progress in their relationship. So in the middle, you have a really strong turning point. In my previous videos, I call it Finding the Goddess. It is the middle part of the story where things start to take a turn before you reach the final destination. It's where it's a aha moment, or they become what they always were meant to be. So taking this story example in our videos, you have it where they are in the closet. They had been finally were able to get into this relationship, and they were being covert. And they're trying to stay, trying to keep their relationship sacred while not having any sort of discrimination or harm by being sheltered. And now with this court case, how are they going to progress from here? And if they are going to come out and try to plan for their wedding, what kind of problems are they going to deal with? Now they're finally coming clean and saying this is the way it is for a while. And you're going to have divisions. You're going to have people who are confused, like, oh, I didn't know. You're going to have people that don't like it. You're going to have some people that love it to death, and they stick by their side. So just that alone, you can have such a dynamic story. And we're going to, since we're talking about society, let's talk about history. Queer people have been there from the get-go. Black people have been there from the get-go. It is kind of tiring to always see a full white cast in a Victorian setting, because there are black people and people of other ethnicities in that time period. And they are there, they are present, and they exist. Same thing with queer people. They had exist during that time period and before. In ancient Greece, men had sexual affairs with other men, and it's considered normal. Again, another example of society that normalized and accepted, the queer community. So if you are doing historical fiction or historical narrative nonfiction, you should consider how it affects the queer person and people of color, and how they are treated differently or the same as other people. You need to compare and contrast how that interaction happened, and not just in that historical time period, but how does it differ from our time period, or is it the same? So I think that most of our history before the Victorian era had been colored in a Puritan light. There are some men who, mostly these are male scholars. There have been female scholars who made these ideas. I guess it's because they know their audience is male. But I don't think they understand that there are some queer interactions, and they color it where, oh, this is like his best friend or cousin or, a confidant. Sure. And that's what helps you sleep at night. So I think there is a depth where this societal bias, or what is considered right and cultured, is actually skewed. And we need to re-examine those accounts and say, are they really? Are we misinterpreting this? So, for those who write historical fictions, please, please, please double check yourself. Double check what's been going on with these people. Bring it to light. And I don't know what level of opinionated language you're allowed to do in academic papers or books for the public. So there's a certain level of language you're allowed to do in academic works. For those who don't know, that you're allowed to have a subjective wording. There's only so much you can do, and in the sciences, you don't want any of the subjective language. You want it just objective and factual as much as you can, which makes it very, very tough to read. And I understand that some people have a hard time understanding what they're trying to say. But there's nothing wrong in double checking works and seeing that there have been some bias and it needs to be re examined. And for those who are doing fiction, you should do the same. Just because it is in Scandinavia doesn't mean they don't have other people visiting them, because there had been trade. Trade has been going on since the Bronze Age. And depending how far reaching it is, depends on how strong the demand is and how they're able to charge and protect those trade routes. And what type of trade routes do they use? So, if there is any sort of global trade between countries, if you have an empire in your fiction, if you have any coastal cities dotting along the sea and ocean, you're going to have people interacting with them outside of their country. And that means they're going to look different. Some of our accounts of Beowulf, not Beowulf, but there have been some Arabic accounts of the Viking nomads, or not really nomads, they had a kingdom and a society. And they wrote accounts of their livelihoods, what they went through. The Mongols had a diverse council because they had a very broad reach of where they had conquered. They conquered from the Mediterranean all the way up to China. So it's a very long country. So be sure to include people who are diverse. There's little to no excuses to have such people in that place. They have to be extremely secluded to have no one who is different. And even then, you have people who are queer in those societies. You have indigenous people that have terms for third genders. Look at the Inuits. Look at people living in the desert. Look at other native tribes around the world. Take your time to look at this. There are people who have a special name for who is not a male or female. They have a special name for those who was born female and were given a male role, and then you have the same for those that were male and took on a female role. So, let me do that. There we go. So you have that in their culture, and they could be as secluded as they can be. But because the tribe is stronger by the people that they are composite on, they're more than willing to create space for these people and say, okay, you have a role in our society. This is your role, and we're going to make sure that you stay with us. You're included. You're there. So you can use that in your work, in your story. It is a reality that can happen. Now, another thing to consider about the queer community is avoiding stereotypes. Not everyone's popping their wrist. Not everyone's doing that. No one is swinging their hips. Not everyone is sparkling. Not everyone is, fabulous. I know gay men who wear normal t-shirts and cargo shorts with socks and flip-flops and, Birkins, and just going along their lives hand to hand, without ever needing to shave or do anything. There is a picture going around on Facebook where there is a gay couple, and they are elderly. One is black, one is white, and they love to match up, and they will match up in their flannels. They will have red day, or they wear their gray flannel. Sometimes they wear whatever it is to match up together, and they're really, really cute. So you can have that. Not every woman is going to make themselves look masculine to be, a lesbian. Not every woman is like that. And not every woman is going to, have, not everyone is going to wear makeup all the time. So why are we seeing this stereotype? Why we're seeing this being out in the forefront? Because how we take care of ourselves is important to our survival. Since we're all dealing with COVID, I'm sure that it makes you feel great that you're putting on makeup and doing your hair and dressing up once in a while, because it boosts your mood. The act of cleaning yourself, fussing over yourself, creates chemical releases in your brain that picks up moods in your body and gives you a pleasing, self-loving sensation. So that's why queer people sometimes go on their appearances. They dress a certain way or do things for themselves because they want to make them feel love. It's a form of self-care. And sometimes it's a shield. You use outfits and makeup as a shield to put a barrier between you and them who will try to hurt you or try to kill you or try to put you down, cause you problems. It's a form of a barrier. It's also signaling to others that you are of this type of manner. It's kind of a signal. There's a lot of coding going on in Hannibal. There's a lot of coding going on in Chucky. There's coding in Stranger Things. If you've never heard of coding, it simply means that you are signaling in a subtle, discreet manner that you are part of this community. For those who are Christians, when Christians were being killed before it was accepted by the Romans. And when most of the Christians were Jewish, before they were Romans, they were trying to display themselves in a discreet manner. This is how you got the fish symbol. This is how you have shepherd motifs. Trying to think of what other stuff we could do. Those who really are into the symbolism of that religion, you're able to see that. You know what I'm talking about. Not everyone was able to display their crosses openly. Some of them were going to the catacombs to talk about the revolution that the apostles were doing, etc. A lot of Christianity had changed to accommodate the Roman audience, and most of that came through St. Paul. So just bear in mind the Christianity that we're seeing is quite different in its early stages. So that type of coding we're seeing through our queer community. Some of it is colors, some of it is style, some of it is, vegetables. Another thing, I think it was in the 40s, 30s, where women who want to pick up other women will order them broccoli because of this one poem where it was described where she had broccoli pieces in her hair. And it was a Grecian poem. I'm trying to remember this poem and it's failing me, and I'm sorry. But during that time frame, they will order broccoli for their person that they want to pick up, etc. So you could incorporate that into your story. How, if they are incognito, if they are in the closet, if they are trying to survive, and yet still want to, progress in their life as who they are. How do they adapt? How do they signal to others, who they are, etc. Now, the downside of coding is accidentally using that as a negative message. This is kind of where the Disney villains come in, which is good and bad. I think we all heard about Ursula, about how they were so inspired by the drag queen. They made Ursula based on the drag queen. So part of me is okay because, oh, hey, and, Disney had been queer, but they can't do it because their audience, don't get it. So I'm okay with, the empowerment of being a villain, that you are not conforming with the society and you're taking control and have all this grand power because you believe in yourself and you're true to yourself. I'm okay with that. But there is a part where, actually, hold on, let me back up a bit. This is also why some of our horror, especially Chucky, and some of the other horror movies, some of that is queer, where you get to fight against those who have been putting you down, and you root for the villain because those people were the assholes who were being horrible. to anyone who's different from them. That's why you'll always see these teenagers at the lakeside. These are the deplorable people that will make fun of you for being a nerd, make fun of you for being gay, etc. That's why it's always the jocks or the cheerleaders and all that stuff. Why they're always getting murdered, in these movies. It's because, I want to take them down. I want to knock their teeth out, because how dare they? It's a sense of empowerment, that, I am dangerous, and I want to fight back. It's sort of like this whole rage, that you want to take off, the shackles of society and throw it in their face. That's kind of the old way of doing things. And I think now it's totally okay to just have other characters, heroes, side characters, etc., who are queer, and whether they're in or out. And we're starting to see that more now in our stories, because there is a bit of a backlash of, that kind of... Oh, the light went out. Hold on. Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry, it went really dark. You kind of see this backlash. Okay. Where, I'm tired of being the villain. I want to be loved and accepted. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to make friends. I want to live a normal life and be a hero for a change. So this is why we're seeing some of this coming out, and I'm okay with that too. I'm okay with, the queer being the hero. I think not to put a wet blanket on the situation. I'm afraid that we're going to go too far forward, where we're going to have the noble savage problem, where we're so idealize the queer person to the point that they're absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. They can do no wrong. They are the essential of good. And I want to say that not to be a wet blanket here, I want to say that just because someone is queer has nothing to do what makes them a good or bad person. Nothing at all. It just only influences how they desire another person, or how their gender orientation is. Who they are as a person. It's only one facet of their life. And you don't have to be good just because you're queer. You don't have to... Just being queer doesn't make you bad or good. It's not on that spectrum of morality. What makes a person good is that they went out of their way to do good for another person without even asking, oh no, there's a car wreck. I'm going to get out my car and try to save them from the flaming vehicle. You don't know if the person that is doing the saving is, a man or woman, or neither, or both. You don't know if what orientation they are. You don't know what ethnicity it is. They are. God, sorry. You don't know. You know it's a person that stopped on the way and went out of their way to save someone, and they don't know who they are. They just know someone is going to die if they don't. That is the embodiment of what is good. and why in the Christian teachings, when Jesus talked about the Good Samaritan, he said, you could have all this wealth, you could have all this status, you can even be Jewish like me. But this Samaritan pulled over and stopped and helped this person, even though they were a different tribe and different ethnicity. They pulled over and stopped because that's what good is. It's kind of trying to slap his audience awake and trying to showcase what morality is. So take that in straight in that example. On the other flip side, I have seen and heard lesbian love triangles. And there's always the bad girl that is the antagonist who gets upset, and uber jealous and will crush the competition. And if they can't crush the competition, they will try to control and contain what they have. So you see this in all types of relationships. You see this in straight relationships, you see this in queer relationships, etc. So you have this all across the spectrum, no matter what it is. Male, female, non-binary. You have different layers. So you could have good guys, you could have bad guys that are queer. Now, we talked about, I'm trying to think what else I could say here before I move on. Okay, a little bit more on the spectrum. You can have layers. I don't think I mentioned this. Yeah, I haven't mentioned this. You can have layers of the spectrum, of the colors. You could be a straight and demisexual, or you can be bi, or lesbian, or gay. You can be trans and pansexual and non-binary. You can be all three. You can have layers. You could be asexual and be in a gay relationship. So let's kind of take apart the other parts of queer. This is a very broad overview. Very, very quickly, let's break it down. Gay and lesbian is simply where they love the same person on the same aisle. We all know that. Bisexuals, they like both. Pansexuals like both, and those in the middle. Pansexuals and bisexuals are not bad or evil in any regard. I'm kind of getting tired of pansexuals saying that they're superior than bisexuals because they don't care about the in-between. The bisexuals just have a very strong extreme end. They like the extreme ends of the gender spectrum. That doesn't mean that they're cruel or horrible to those in between. It just means that they're not interested. And they just don't. It doesn't drive them. It doesn't, float their boat. No different than men not interested in women. Women don't float their boat. So that doesn't mean that, non-binary people, third gender people, they're like horrible human beings just because, a bisexual is not interested. As a demisexual, I'm tired of hearing this too, so It means that they're just not interested, and they're kind of cater to the extreme parts of the spectrum. And the pansexuals are kind of like a little bit more broad, where they're a little bit, let me see, where the societal norms of gender doesn't really correlate with how they interact with a person. It's a person-to-person case. And it's not a factor in their romantic interest. So that's the difference between the bi and pansexual. I know that I'm going to get a lot of hate for it. But that's just how it is. Like, you could easily demonize lesbians and gays for the same thing that you're demonizing bisexuals with this same type of rhetoric. So I think we need to have in our community a little bit more love. And stop beating ourselves up within our community. I think we need to band together and accept each other. So, another thing about bisexuals is that they are bisexuals no matter what partner they have. Just because they have a partner that is the same gender, that doesn't make them a gay person. Just because they have an opposite partner, that doesn't mean that they're trying to have attention. Or they're not gay, they're just claiming they're gay. It's nothing like that. Bisexuals are bisexual no matter the orientation. Same thing for pansexuals. They don't have to date a non-binary or third gender person to be pansexual. Sorry. And not sorry. So we got the romantic sexual interactions. Now we're getting into I'm sorry. Since we're still talking about the gender orientations, let's talk about trans. Trans is simply transforming from one to another. I can't speak today. Transformation. It's so essential in our story. It is getting rid of the old and coming into a new person. And for trans people, it means that you're throwing off, this veil that's just not you. You're born into a body that's just not working out for you. And you're tired of being X when you're really Y. And that's why they moved to who they are meant to be. I know a few trans people, and this is how they feel. I'm not feeling myself. I feel depressed because I'm wearing a mask to appease other people, and I'm not taking care of myself. So, no matter what they were, it matters who they become. And who they become is true to who they are as a person. No different than putting on, it's more complex than just putting on makeup, putting on fresh clothes, and coming out the door to showcase yourself. Because they have to biologically transform into this to this perfect human being. So, trying to gather my thoughts here. I will not rage against J.K. Rowling because she's a lost cause. I like Harry Potter. It reminds me of some of my old school institutions, but there are some failings and cracks in that brick house. Um, and that is good and bad. And that is showcased through her work. I mean, there are plenty of schools that separate based on gender. Okay, it's nothing new, but her still advocating this wrong ideal is not okay. It's never been okay. Um, and I'm pretty sure after the kids post Hogwarts are able to like come out and say, "This is me. This is who I am." Deal, you know. So. Okay, I'm kind of lost track of my thoughts here. Okay, trans. So transformation, you can transform from one gender to another. You can transform from a third gender to a binary gender. You can transform from whatever it was and be neither. So it's not just man to woman or woman to man. It can be third gender to any one of those two, or simply a non-binary. So you can have a non-binary or third gender as the result. You can have it where it's in the beginning. So it just simply means they metamorphosize into this form. And with our technology, with our science, we're able to help them progress that way. Otherwise, before then, it was just by clothes and mannerisms. And in that society, it's like, okay, you are no longer this, you are this now. And I think it was, I'm trying to remember if it was Miss Daisy. There's a movie where it was a man who cross-dressed. Really, he was a trans. And he put on these clothes and this makeup and this hair and just walked out in society. No one noticed. No one cared. It was New York City, the most busiest place ever. Everyone's walking their way. No one batted an eye. No one noticed. And they just kept on walking. It was a fulfilling and transformative event for this character walking out there as who they're meant to be, a woman. So when you are working on a fantasy world, you have a decision of, having this kind of character in your story. For me, I was able to have Aramis Perez became the way he is through magic. It was through a magical fountain, the sacred waters of Zemzem. It's a bit of an Arabic reference, but it helped transform him into who he was, a man. Eastern and Mediterranean folklores have transformation tales. So this is nothing new. It's just done through magical means. So you can have that in your work if you so choose. And understand that, it makes them feel like, okay, this is me. This is who I am meant to be. I feel like I could breathe now. I could be myself. I feel comfortable with myself. I'm no longer depressed. So it's a bit sigh of relief. So let's see. And asexuals and demisexuals. There's a difference between sexual and romance. Sex and romance. Let's talk about that. You can have romance without sex. You can have that. And why is it dark? Hold on. Trying to create light in this area. It's just it's really hard to do this on a cloudy day. You can have romance without sex. People who are asexual, they don't have any sort of orgasmic reactions to sex. Sex is not a turn on. What really makes them feel worthwhile with their romantic partner is other languages of love. It could be service, it could be gifts, it could be other forms of affection. It could just simply be touch or hugging or conversation, intellectual stimuli. Same thing with demisexuals. With demisexuals, there is a very high emotional threshold to reach before I could even consider dating you. And I hate dating people I have no interest in. It's like nails on the chalkboard for me. If I'm not interested, if I have no emotional, romantic feelings for that person, it's just hanging out. It's just having fun and hanging out. It's trying to create a romantic interaction. It's like, it's nerve-wracking. And there's no other way for me to describe it. Does that mean I don't have crushes? No, I do have crushes. Does that mean I never dated? No, I had dated. And there are 2-3 people who I enjoy being with, of those crushes and dates that I had. So they're the lucky ones. But even then, it didn't work out. So, trying to think here. Sex has nothing to do with how someone goes out to the dating world and sees a potential partner. When I go out to the bar, I don't go out looking for a catch. I don't go out like, oh, I'm going to attract someone. When I go to the bar, I want nasty, horrible junk food that I could sink my teeth into and drink pints and pints of beer and watch my favorite sport with my friends. That's all I want. That's all I care. I don't care for anyone hitting on me. But yeah, it's a huge, public space. There's a possibility someone may flirt. It's okay. But that doesn't mean I'm going to have to date that person. I receive tons of, phone numbers that I just never call. And simply because I would rather know the person first before I even dare interact with them. And I'm personally tired of... Yeah, this is not working. And I'm just personally tired of, having dates that are lackluster because I have no connection with them. So you can have asexual and demisexual relationships that are romantic and romantic interests. And you can have romantic interests that are straight or bisexual or gay. You can have that. And you can have in-betweens. You can have, dates with both men and women. So you can see how there are layers. I think you're starting to get a better sense how it's a spectrum of queerness, and how there's different interactions and levels. But just because everyone's in that community doesn't mean we all get along. It's no different than, dealing with a small town. Not every single person in that small town gets along hunky-dory, okay? You probably get a sense of feeling when I mention about pansexuals, berating bisexuals for not being like them pansexuals. So you have problems in the community interacting with each other, and it's not always pleasant. And it takes education and time and interacting with that person outside of their comfort zone to try to say, okay, we're on the same page, we're in this together. So keep that in mind when you're working in your stories, that just because they're queer doesn't mean they automatically get along. They can have some spats. So you can have that in your story. It's okay to have drama. We all live for drama. This is why we create stories. We love drama. So let's go here. I think the major thing that is a turnoff for a lot of queer people is the message that you put around the queer person. This is why some of the group just get tired of seeing queer people being villainized. Like, I am tired of being the bad guy. I want to be the good guy. And that is true, especially in fantasy, where they have the bad guy that happened to be queer. And they have all the straight people fighting them. And then, that's it. It's like a very shallow layer. And you have to wonder, what is the meaning behind this? Is it because, they're bad because they're queer? Or they happen to be queer? Or they're bad and they, so it's a very mixed message. And it's very superficial. And it's not really well done. And a lot of people looking at this Pulp Fiction, said, like, this is trash. And of course it was trash. That's why it sold so low. Same thing with Lovecraft. Lovecraft had a horrible, horrible xenophobia. And really made people who are mixed blood, mudbloods, where people who have Native American heritage, people who are black, people who are not your Caucasian European person, doing all sorts of magical stuff that summoned the great, monstrosities of the unknown. So you have that problem, which, you have the fantastical horror bits of Lovecraft, which most people love, but you also have this horrible message about race and mingling with race. Is the problem that we have with Nazis, that they shouldn't mingle. And sorry, I like a good rosé. I think, biologically, it's actually healthier to go and marry people out of your genetic line and interact with them and fall in love with them and, produce families and be diverse. It's actually going to make you a better human. I almost said animal because I was thinking of the animal kingdom, but It makes you a better being. And if you're concerned about, health of the bloodlines, and all that crap, this actually will help create a stronger DNA strand, is diversity. Intermingling with your cousins and within the family creates severe disorders that is just not healthy. So I don't know how many times I have to say this. It's not healthy. If you're concerned about, that superiority of race or whatever crap. I have a German background, and I'm so glad my grandmom said fuck that shit and just married someone who was Native American and Swede and French. Like, I'm glad she did. Because those Nazis could go fuck themselves. I'm trying not to make an angry video, but that came out. And if that was vulgar, I'm sorry. I'm American. I don't like Nazis. Okay, so if you are writing this and you have a queer person, and I hope that, you feel like, okay, I'm doing things right. And if you feel like, oh no, I did something wrong, don't panic. I'm not here to make you feel bad. Just double check yourself. Just double check your society. Double check your obstacles. If the character is oppressed, how do you show they are oppressed? If the character is accepted, how is that shown? What is the magic of friendship? How do they interact in a romantic level? Or maybe romance is, not something of consideration. I've yet to see demisexuals in literature, so it would be nice that we're not Spencers and not prudes. Because you could joke about sex. You could talk about, those type of things and still be asexual and demisexual. So, but don't feel like you have to make every single person queer. Because not everyone can. That's what makes us unique. Is that some of us are and some of us aren't. And how those interactions is what makes us who we are. And that's the good and bad thing about story dynamics and character dynamics. So take the time to double check yourself. You are going to go through editing revisions anyway when you're creating the story. If this is like your first draft and you're looking at this video, just finish your story. Get it done, get it out of the way, and then you could look at your story in a new light. If you don't happen to have anyone queer in there and you're wanting to put someone in there that is queer, ask, how does that change the story? How does that change the plot? Is that going to make it a better story? What new dynamics are we looking at because we're putting this in here? So it's more than just a label that you could slap on and then shove out the door for production manufacturing. So take the time to look at your characters and how they interact with society and others. And be kind to yourself. It takes a lot of revisions. You're going to go through about 10 or 15 anyway. So one of those is going to be those moments where you look at this. And that's it. So I hope this is not intimidating. I hope this gives you some encouragement and some food for thought. I hope it's educational. And I hope that this is a big help. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I'm so glad I was able to put this out. So let me know what you think down below. If you are, I'll be surprised if any hateful person will finish this to the end, but if you are one of those hateful people, please ask yourself, is this what God really wants for me? You know, is this something that I'm actually doing for the greater good? And the greater good is, am I helping someone? Because the greater evil want us to divide us and have us fight each other and cause all sorts of problems. And being evil is going out of the way to hurt someone. So I think you need to step back and go, why am I going out of my way to make someone miserable? Am I being miserable? And what can I do to turn that around? So, and pray on it, go think about it. So, everyone else, I hope you leave a comment and your thoughts, and I hope this is helpful. If you want similar topics like this, let me know. If you like this, hit that like button. I have older content on my channel that more or less talks about the subject matter, but nothing this in depth. So if you want to go through my older videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe so that way you can mark it on your page and you could go through as many as you want. I'm doing this every 2 weeks now, like I used to do. So I know I missed the 2 weeks before this one. I was wanting to do a video, but Comic-Con happened. And Comic-Con happened very, very insightful for someone who is a storyteller. So I enjoyed the experience and learning from those who are in the craft, whether it is graphic novels or actual novels itself. So if you have a chance, I suggest you go and look at Comic-Con next year for similar panels. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Alright, so I apologize that there is more after the goodbye and not having this in between my video. I wasn't able to add this in between what I was saying in the video and the audio without losing data. It's just been one of those days. So I neglected to mention about non-binary people and third gender people. So let me quickly get that out of the way. When I was talking about how these genders earlier in this video, where it is a construct of society of having a man or a woman, because biology creates variations of the thing where you have different aspects of gender and it's going to be expressed in different ways. And it's remarkable how it all comes into one particular, what we would call male or female. There's so much in between. So the idea that it's a construct of society, those who are non-binary said, I don't feel like I am this societal gender. We're talking about gender norms in our society. And you can look at this further online where we put a lot of emphasis of, oh, that's very girlish, or that's very guy-ish, that's masculine, that's feminine. So non-binary people and third gender people are like, no, I am neither one of those. I do not see myself as being masculine or feminine. And I am none of the above. I am a non-binary person. That's the whole point of the term. When you create a non-binary character, think about how to use pronouns. Because creating their own gender also influences our language. We have he and she, and he and her, and his and them, etc. So we have all that. Do not use it. It is currently, and from here on out, considered for objects that are not living, like chairs and desk and other inanimate objects. It is for inanimate items, whereas they considers, what brings to mind people or a person. So you need to really make sure that you got this proper. Whether your non-binary person is a hero or a side character or a villain, you need to have that pronoun done properly throughout your story. And even I am horrible in it. I haven't been quite consistent in my writing. Sometimes I accidentally throw out her. And there are non-binaries that will use the her attribute or the he attribute on their expression. There is gender fluidity. It does exist. But just to be safe, I would just use they, and them, and themselves, and their. I know there's other pronouns that are used, like ze, or xe, or ze. So you can't use those too, just so long you are consistent in all of that. An editor worth their salt is going to help double check your work for you and make sure it's all proper. Which is another thing where you really don't want to go through the auto system blindly. There are grammar programs out there, and they may accidentally convert some of that language to he and she. And if you're going through so much content, you may not catch yourself accidentally clicking on those. And of course, no different than anyone in the queer community, it's beyond pronouns. You have to consider how they view themselves and those around them. It's harder to do with a villain. I should know, because of the doppelganger queen. Because the page / screen time for villains are usually 10% and under. So it's very, very hard to express their mindset and motivations in the work, unless they are a major influence, like Hannibal, or if they are a lead star in their own right, like a falling hero. So just be careful and making sure you're putting the right message out there, where you're not making them a villain just because they're queer. You're having them as a villain outside of that queerness, where they are evil because they kill people, or they are stealing things, or they are just simply an antagonist where they're an enemy spy. You know, they just happen to be the obstacle the protagonist had to overcome. But they're not evil because they're queer. So, that being said, if you're able to have a non binary human who is a side character or a hero, you have a lot more depth to go into, where they can feel frustrated for not hearing their pronouns and they just have to correct them. Or maybe it's just been a buildup of these microaggressions